Okay, open up your Bible if you would to Job chapter 31. Job 31. This is Job kind of gives us an outline on his life here. You can see I have quite the breakdown up here where he hits on all these little points or different things. His covenant with his eyes, his integrity, his marital faithfulness, the way he treats slaves and the poor, his dependency on God, ethical relations with other people, and even the way he used his land and the treatment of the land. And Samuel Cox, a commentator, wrote that this is perhaps one of the most lovely in the whole poem, and his theme is worthy of the exquisite and flowing strain in which it is couched. It's one of the great statements of personal ethics, is what he's pretty much saying there. We're going to start with the covenant of his eyes, there in verses 1 through 4. He writes, I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a virgin? And what is the portion of God from above, or the heritage of the Almighty from on high? Is it not calamity to the unjust, and disaster to those who work iniquity? Does he not see my ways and number all my steps? Now, right there at the beginning where he says, use that word covenant in the Hebrew, that's literally cut. Do you know why? Have we ever discussed that? When you make a covenant back then, there actually, a lot of the times, it's to cut. And we actually see this occur between God and Abraham, when Abraham gives his sacrifice, and he has Abraham cut all these sacrifices in half, and then God goes between them. That is to cut. That's if I do not come through with what I say, may this happen to me. And so he is saying, I am going to make a cut. I'm making like a sacrifice to this. This is important to me. I make this covenant with my eyes that I will not look upon a woman that in a lustful way, is what he's talking about. He says there at the very end in verse 4, does he, God, not see my ways and number all my steps? I think he's saying that Job realizes that God was fully aware of his every thought and of his every action. Even the Hebrew writer talks about this in chapter 4 of Hebrews. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Now remember, when do we think Job occurred? What's the time period here? Very early. The patriarchal time. But before the flood, I should say, not patriarchal. Before the flood occurred, way back then, he did not have any writings. All he would have would be, those things would be handed down by the stories from Adam and others before the flood. And then the next section, excuse me, Job's integrity. If I have walked with falsehood, and my foot has hastened after deceit, let him, God, weigh me with accurate scales, and let God know my integrity. If my step has turned from the way, or my heart followed my eyes, or if any spot has stuck to my hands, let me sow and another eat, and let my crops be uprooted. So here again, he talks about his life. That walk, the way he's moving, is it in falsehood? Am I lying? If I am, let God see my integrity. Let him weigh me with accurate scales. Now, what do you think he's saying with those first two verses there in chapter 31? What do you think he is saying? If I have walked with falsehood there in verse 5, or if I have deceit, let him, God, weigh me with accurate scales. What do you think he's saying? So it's almost like he's accusing God. Well, why? Like we've mentioned in the past, it's almost like he thinks he doesn't deserve what's happening to him. Why won't you come down here and measure me with accurate scales? What have I done? So, and And again, this goes back to what we said in the very beginning when we started with Job. Isn't this what a lot of people say, and sometimes even we may do this, when hardship or difficult times come, who do we blame? Why is God allowing this to happen? And we see that mentality, I think that idea coming from Job. And then there, verses 7 and 8, he makes those 3 consecutive claims. He had not turned from the way. His heart had not followed his eyes. And then number 3, no spot on his hands, so they weren't stained with sin. And he goes on from there to his marital faithfulness. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or I have lurked at my neighbor's doorway, may my wife grind for another and let others kneel down over her, for that would be a lustful crime. Moreover, it would be an iniquity punishable by judges, for it would be fire that consumes to Abaddon and would uproot all my increases. So he's talking about his marital faithfulness. If I have done something that was wrong in my marriage, if I was waiting for my neighbor to leave so I can go into his house and with his wife, and whatever it may be, may it come back onto me. But it hasn't happened. He hasn't done these things, is what he's saying. Again, it's pointing to the idea, why are these things happening to me? Then he goes into the treatment of slaves. If I have despised the claim of my male or female slaves, when they filed a complaint against me, what then could I do when God arises? And when he calls me to account, what will I answer him? Did not he who made me in the womb make him, and did in the same one fashion us in the womb? So he's talking about that God make me in the womb and also make the slave in the womb. So Job is making a connection here that I think pretty good thoughts that he's having, especially so early on before we have any writings from the Lord, to say, I am no different than they are. And how many men, even after the flood and when the law comes, and the earth had been here for a long time, kings, princes, nobles, think they were of better birth than those who were slaves. We still do that today. We still do. And here's Job, before he had any real information other than what may have been passed down, recognizing, how can I be better than this person? We were both born in the womb. I just happen to have all these blessings. And what he's doing here is showing, here's what I have done with all the blessings God has given me. How have I misused my eyes that God gave me? How have I misused the integrity of my heart? How have I misused my wife or my slaves? He goes on to look at the poor. But there in verses 16 to 23. See, you got all these if-then statements. If I have kept the poor from their desire, or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel alone, and the orphan has not shared it. But from my youth he grew up with me as with a father, and from infancy I guided her. If I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or that the needy had no covering, if the loins have not thanked me, and if he has not been warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I have lifted up my hand against the orphan, because I saw I had support in the gate, let my shoulder fall from the socket, and my arm be broken off at the elbow. For calamity from God is a terror to me, and because of his majesty, I can do nothing. So the care of widows, orphans, the poor was near to the heart of God all through the Old Testament. We also know in the book of James as well. And based on what we're reading from Job, is it near to the heart of Job? Was this an important topic to him as well? And it was. When have I seen any of these occur and not do the right thing? If I ever lift up my hand against an orphan, and even in some sort of bad ways, maybe to make myself look good to other people, may my arm be cut off. Again, his question is simply, what have I done? He's going through and he's showing his life of all the things he's done. And then there in verse 23, the calamity of God is still on him. He affirmed that with a profound awareness of God's holiness was guiding principle in his treatment of others, and yet what has God done? He could do nothing wrong. It inspired him to pursue righteousness. He shunned evil. And so he has this principle guiding him, but then God's on him right now. So his question is, why is God's calamity on me? It should be on me if I had done these things in his mind, but I haven't done these things. And again, we see here where both slaves and masters are, he sees them as being the same. Talking about, we all grew up together. He makes that parenthetical statement he makes there in verses, where's that verse at? Oh, verse 18. But from my youth he grew up with me as with a father, and from my infancy I guided her. He's talking about knowing not only from his age that he was a child, they were a child, and he would even raise them up. He has a love and a heart for all people. Verses 24 to 28. If I had put my confidence in gold and called fine gold my trust, if I have gloated because of my wealth was great and because my hand had secured so much, if I had looked at the sun when it shone or the moon going in splendor, and my heart became secretly enticed, and my hand threw a kiss from my mouth, that too would have been an iniquity calling for judgment. For I would have denied God above. So what he's saying here is that when he saw the sun or he saw the moon, he didn't look at it and be so enticed by it and think, man, what great God must be behind that moon? Or what great God must be behind that sun? I would never do that. The other night I was coming over here to the building and I saw the moon. The sun was just rising. The moon was real low. And it was like a blood moon, bright red right there. I've tried many times getting a photo of that, but it never comes out very good for me, so I gave up on it. But it's beautiful. How many nations rise up after the flood and worship the moon, and worship the sun? Not Job. He even recognized that would be sinful, because I would be denying God. I have not done it. So he has that. And then he goes on in verses 29 to 37. Have I rejoiced in the extinction of my enemy, or exulted when evil befell me? No, I have not allowed my mouth to sin by asking for his life in a curse. Have the men of my tent not said, who can find one who has not been satisfied with his meat? The alien has not lodged outside, for I have opened my doors to the traveler. Have I covered my transgressions like Adam, by hiding my iniquity in my bosom? Because I feared the great multitude, and the contempt of families terrified me, and kept silent and did not go out of doors? Oh, that I had one to hear me. Behold, here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me, and the indictment which my adversary has written. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it to myself like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. So here we see, he talks about in the opening of this, how he treats his enemies and those who are traveling and those who go by. We even see that from Adam. Remember when Adam, some men came to his tent? I don't think he knew it at the beginning, but they turned out to be angels and the angel of the Lord. How did he treat them when they first showed up? Do you remember? This is when they were on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah. And he saw them coming. He went and he got Sarah to make them a meal, wash their feet. He gave them as much comfort as he possibly could. And we see Job with that same kind of attitude that we see here. We see also the alien has not lodged outside, for I have opened the doors, my doors to the traveler. The Hebrew writer again in 13:2, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. Job did not play the hypocrite. He did not try to seek or conceal his transgressions. He says here, like Adam. I noticed on this phrase, was that 33 or 34? Verse 33, have I covered my transgressions like Adam, that's the New American Standard. Some actually say like men, they plural it, or others. It's actually the singular word for man, which is the name Adam, but I think that's who he has to be talking about. I think the New American Standard is right. He has not tried to conceal his sin like Adam did. Did Adam try to conceal his sin? Man, he did. They went in hiding, and he tried to conceal his sin. He didn't do that. From what we're seeing here, what Job is saying, is he a righteous man? He is. If God had been told Satan, he's righteous more than any. And he's going through, he's saying, what have I done to deserve this? He said, here's my signature, my mark of identity. And the mark he's talking about here is not the writing, he's talking about his life. It's like, look at the life I have lived. I've done everything I could possibly do. So let the Almighty answer me in the indictment which my adversary has written. So he's calling on God to respond to his defense and these charges that are being made against him. The indictment was a written record used to bring a matter before a judge in a case. Some think that this term here refers to Job's acquittal type papers, but I think it's the indictment being made against him. He's wanting God to come down and take a look at this. Maybe he's wanting God to come down and look between him and his friends about what they're charging him with. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it to myself like a crown. So to bear something on your shoulder or forehead gives you a sense of identity and responsibility. And what he's talking about bearing is any wrong he had done. If God comes down here and shows me I've done something wrong, I'll take responsibility for it. But what have I done? And then he says, I would declare to him the number of my steps like a prince. I would approach him. So nowhere else in the Old Testament is anyone said to approach God like a prince. I think the simile here refers to the attitude of someone who has no reason to feel guilty. Have you ever had a kid enter a room and you can just tell they have done something wrong? The guilt is all over them. When they come in, maybe they don't have confidence. So you call them in, you can tell the confidence isn't there. They're nervous or they're sweating. When I approach God, I'm going to approach him like a prince. I have nothing to feel guilty about. I have nothing to make me sweat. There's nothing there. I will approach him like a prince. I would have no fear going before the Lord. That's pretty significant. He has confidence. I think God was right to say, Satan, why don't you try him? See what you find. And then verses 38 to 40. If my land cries out against me, and its furrows weep together, if I have eaten its fruits without money, or have caused its owners to lose their lives, let briars grow instead of wheat, and stinkweed instead of barley. The words of Job are ended. So he's personifying the land here as if it was crying out. He's managed, obviously we know he managed large estates, paying his workers. He's acquired everything he's gotten from others on a fair price, it seems to be saying. But if he had been unjust, Job was willing that his land be cursed with thorns and weeds. And then this very last phrase, the words of Job are ended. That's actually a formula we see in other places in the Bible. Jeremiah 51:64, Psalm 72:20. When a statement is done, he's done. This is the end of my defense. I have nothing more to say. That is it. Now after this, Elihu is going to speak up, 5 or 6 chapters. And when you read through that, and has anyone actually read through that yet? Elihu's? A lot of the things he says sounds really good. It sounds really good. Just like Job's other friends. A lot of things they say sound, man, yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But the problem is that they are taking generalizations and making them absolutes upon Job. And he's doing it also. I mean, a lot of things Elihu says, like, wow, that sounds really good. But it's not true in Job's case. And a lot, I noticed when I was reading up a little bit on it this morning, I was looking at some commentators, a lot of them think Elihu's words shouldn't even be there. They don't belong there. And the reasoning is because there's no response from Job. You just have these in there, and then you go to the Lord. They think it just makes more sense. This is the end of Job's words, and then you get the Lord come out and to speak. Wouldn't that make more sense, wouldn't it? If we read that last part there, the words of Job ended, and then the Lord comes out of the whirlwind and speaks to him. That almost seems natural, right? But everything with Elihu seems to kind of breaks that up. So a lot of commentaries think that that's doesn't belong here. I disagree. I think Job said his final statement, which this is a great final statement to make to his friends. And he's hearing all these things from Elihu, which is pretty much a lot of the same things that his other friends had already said. Why would he dignify that with any words? Who has he been asking to come and judge his case? Does he want his friends or this young Elihu to come and judge his case? Or does he want God? He wants God. He doesn't care, I think, what this guy has to say anymore, or what any of them has to say. So he's not even going to speak up. It's not that he feels like he has no words to say. It's just what good will it do? They can't judge his case. Only God can. And he knows that. And I think that is what he is looking toward to. So all through this chapter we see a pure heart from Job. He's looking at his eyes. He's got a pure heart. He is honest. He is faithful in his marriage. He is sensitive to those under adversity and under his authority. He's kind to the poor. He's faithful to God. He's good to his fellow men. He is fair in his business dealings. We see there at the very end. This is a man who strives really hard. Now, does he think that all that he has done has earned him the right to be right before God? I don't think he thinks that way. I think he knows that God is a just God, that Job has done no wrong, and that the bad things that are happening to him aren't because of any sin that's being challenged against him, and he doesn't know why these things are happening. And in the beginning, it almost seems like he was just challenging and saying no to his friends, no to his friends. But as it carries on, it seems like he brings out that same attitude, thinking, why are these things happening to me? It's almost as if God does think I've done something wrong. I wish he would come down here and show me and try my case, because he's not going to get any fair judgment from his friends. I think we would all, if we went through the kind of ordeal that Job went through, I think we would all go through this same cycle that he finds himself in if we are faithful and righteous. That we would stand firm and we would stand strong, but with the relentless attacks from people around us and all the pain and sorrow, we may actually start to think and wonder, maybe, but then still hold fast like Job does, Lord willing, that we would hold fast to that whatever it is, he is the righteous judge. And I'm done talking. I'm going to wait for his judgment. And if that means I have to sit here and listen to you all day, Elihu, so be it. He's done. And so that's why I see as this wraps up. And so I want to encourage you, read through those chapters. We're not going to do the next several one by one. It starts in chapter 32 with Elihu, and it goes all the way, I think that 37? Yeah, to chapter 37. Read through those, and I'm going to kind of give you a synopsis of what he's saying. I may pull out a few tidbit verses, but any thoughts or questions you have on any of those, bring those, and we'll look at that next week. I think it's interesting, but he's pretty much doing the same thing. I do think Elihu is trying very hard to be respectful, but we'll see more when we get to that next week. Great chapter in chapter 31. So great way for Job to, I think, in all his statements and everything that is going on. Here's my life. And wouldn't you like to have that on your tombstone? I have done all that I could possibly do to be right with myself, my wife, those that are under my authority, those who are my enemies, those who come into my presence, and in all my dealings. I have done nothing wrong. What a good man Job was. And to have that immortalized for us in the Bible, what a blessing to him. The Lord loved Job to give all this to him. Any thoughts or any questions, anything you want to pull out from the chapter we looked at this evening? Alex. Yeah, inaccurate scales. Not the scales of his friends. Inaccurate scales. I like for everyone online. Alex is talking about verse 23, where Job says he was afraid of the calamity, the terror of God, and Alex said that was governing his behavior, his fear of the Lord, and that's a great point because that's exactly right. When you jump ahead to the New Testament and Jesus comes to the scribes and Pharisees, what was it that governed their behavior? It was the law, not God. In fact, that was the theme pretty much for the Sermon on the Mount was they were looking at a law-centered righteousness rather than a God-centered righteousness. And his behavior was governed by God and nothing else, and not by men. It was God, a fear of the Lord, healthy fear of the Lord. And that's absolutely true. And man, we've lost that. Well, there is no governance on that. Absolutely, because that's why I constantly teach that you can do whatever you want, make whatever changes in our government you want, but until we affect the minds and hearts of people, nothing's going to change. We've got to change them and change that mentality of who's in charge. Yeah, and they don't even think they are worshiping their Creator, but they are. And they most certainly do. Good point. Good comments. Oh yeah, and that was I think Job trying to point that out to them. The last previous chapters where he's saying, here's my life. When he goes there 2 chapters ago, here's my life, everything I did right, and then now even the lowliest of lowlies mock me. And for what? What have I done? And then he goes and he gives it another full outline of his life. For what? You guys think I've done something, but I want to be judged by accurate scales. And I'm done with you guys. Elihu, you can talk all you want. Not responding anymore. I'm waiting for the Lord. And that goes right back to your point about what governed his attitude. It was a fear of God. If it was the way he treated it or himself, then bitterness would have set in. You guys owe it to me. But he doesn't hold that to him. He doesn't hold it to him. And God knew that. And I think that's why at the very end he tells Job to make sacrifice for his 3 friends. Because God knew he would do that for those 3 friends. So what a good man Job was. All right. Any other comments? Good comment, Emily.